cigars all around. Cheers, y'all.
Welcome, ladies, to this fine program known as Smoking and Toasting. It's all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. This is, in fact, the world-famous Smoking and Toasting. And we're up to show number 108. And we're brought to you by B&B Butchers and Restaurant at 1814 Washington Ave in Houston, and in the shops at Clear Fork and Fort Worth. BB Italia, BB Lemon and Washington. And didn't check in with B&B last week. We were told that they were shooting for the 14th of this month, today being the 7th. So a week from today is their target to be reopened in the dining room at B&B. So you can go by and grab some.
Go by and actually get out and be a little bit social at 25% capacity.
Yeah, you know, I promised my wife I'm going to take her to dinner soon because some of the restaurants are reopened here in Houston, which is where our show is based, and we are in a chance to get their systems down. Even that stuff is, it's one of the things. So, anyway, Ian, welcome to the show. I did lose your picture there. I assume you're adjusting something. But also, welcome to the show, Cristian Olave. Cristian, welcome. It's nice to have you.
Hello, sir. How are you? I see beautiful sky behind you. It's a nice day in Houston.
Yes. So it is. I am on the balcony of my apartment, which is fairly high up, and we've had really good luck with the wind when we've done our previous Skype shows. But it's supposed to be a little higher today, so I'll just... If it gets to where it's too noisy, let me know, and I'll readjust and go inside. But of course, when I go inside, I can't enjoy a cigar, and that's what we're looking forward to doing. So, Cristian, you are with the Dalmore and with Jura. What is the name of the actual company that distributes these?
So there's a couple of answers to your question. The company that I work for is White & Mackay, which is a Scotland-based company with headquarters in Glasgow. We own several whiskey brands, and as you mentioned, the Dalmore being one of them, Jura, also Fetterkern, Tabnavulin. Our blended Scotch is John Barr. And we also make the Shackleton, which is a blended malt. Those are the ones that you can find here in the U.S. Actually, Tabnavulin not available in the U.S. So let me correct myself.
Okay.
And then we are distributed here in the United States by Southern Glaciers in Texas. We have different distributors throughout the country. But
so you don't work for the distributor in this case. You work for the larger company.
I work for the distilleries. Correct.
Got it. That makes sense. Well, I was just mentioning before we went on the air that I've been enjoying some of the Dalmore lately. We did a show that dealt with different cask finishes.
Mm-hmm.
Whiskey and port finishes. Ian had several different sherry cask finishes, but one of the port casks that I had was yours, which, by the way, I'll just say now, delicious. Hello, it was wonderful.
Well, thank you very much.
So,
we aim to please.
I have
Tommy, tell us a little bit about the Dalmore. Go ahead, Ian.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna say I haven't had Dalmore in a little while. But the original cigar malt that was out, I think, in the 10 years ago or more.
So there's been a couple of iterations of the Dalmore. The original came out sometime in the 90s. It was a little bit different than what's around today. If you'd like, I can actually tell you a little bit about the differences now.
Well, let's bring that talking point up when we're actually tasting that. Yeah. But I was a big fan of it, and then I was really sad when it disappeared for a while. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm looking really, really forward to this.
Yes, absolutely. This should be fun.
So you wanted to hear a little bit more about the distillery, I understand.
And I want to get to that in just a moment. First of all, I just wanted to take care of a little bit of business here. Ian, this is show number 180, and so we only missed, when the whole virus thing happened, we only missed one show, and that means we're getting closer now to 200. Originally, 200 would have been the last week in August. Now I believe, I'll have to go through the calendar again, but I believe it will wind up being the first week of the first Thursday in September. Our idea for the 200, of course, was to do the same thing that we did for show number 100, which was to invite everyone who'd ever been on the show to come, if they could, and join with us. I don't know how we're going to do that with social distancing. I have no idea, because I have a feeling we're still going to be distancing then. So I'm just throwing it out there, Ian. If you have any ideas, start scratching your head about that, because we got to do something special for 200, and it's going to be more of a challenge than we thought.
We're just going to need a big outdoor area. We're going to need to paint off the ground like a checkerboard, and everyone has to stay in their own box.
Right, and someone can maybe go from area to area pouring.
Yes, but they'll wear a full quarantine suit.
Yeah, with a full hazmat suit. I think that'll be the plan. That will be the plan. All right. Maybe there's, some of those bartending services. Maybe some of them will have some of that gear. We can hire one to walk around and pour. So, in any case, please know that we're working on it, and it's something that's going to be pretty exciting. Ian, I see you've ordered a cigar. I want you, because we're going to be tasting it with the Cigar-Malt whiskey. And if there ever was a whiskey that was basically designed and engineered to go with the cigar, it would be that. So, Ian, pull that back a little. I can tell what it is, but it's a little out of focus there. Pull it back. I think we can see it a little better. Aha! That would be the H. Upman. Is that the Governor?
That's the Herman's batch.
The Herman's batch. Very nice.
Well, the Herman's batch. I haven't had this before. I don't know if you had this one yet.
I have, and it's quite delicious, as a matter of fact.
I am just past the initial light on it, and it's absolutely fantastic so far. What I read on this, I figured it'd probably go pretty well with the cigar malt, although I think since the cigar malt, due to its name, is inherently designed to go with cigars, I think that we'd have good luck with almost any cigar at that point.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. So I wanted to do something special. So I looked through my humidor for cigars that I'd been saving for a special occasion, and lo and behold, found the perfect one. It was a cigar that you gave me, Ian, a while back. It's been in my humidor for a long time. It actually has two uses. You can either smoke the cigar, or you can use the tube as a sort of a billy club. It is the Cohiba Edicion Diamante. It's a 2013 special edition, and that by far the biggest Tubo cigar that I had to put in the humidor. In fact, I had to lay it kind of crossways in the humidor to get it to work. But Ian, I believe I know you gave me this, so I'm assuming you had one of these as well, right?
I did. I bought a 3-pack of them.
Okay.
And so you got one, and I got one, and then a buddy of mine got one for his wedding.
Ah, nice. Well, as you can see, that's a nice sized cigar for a Jura. So I'll be excited to light this one up and tell you guys what we get. So a couple of things to talk about on the show today. We're also going to be tasting a few beers. I've brought something to the show that is I have no idea what to expect. It's one of Karbach's special series, and as we all know, we give Karbach a bit of a hard time because since they have been purchased by AB, and we just feel like some of their beers have not maintained what we wanted to maintain. But they also do have some beers that we really like. And so it'll be interesting what today's is like.
And that puts them in the category of macro craft.
Macro Pack, yeah. Today's beer is the Karbach F.U.N series, number 18, and it's a High Tide Ale. And I just want to show it to you real quick because unlike almost every other Karbach, this one's in a bottle. There's usually Karbachs in cans. So it's an ale brewed with passion fruit and spices and aged in tequila barrels. So we'll be trying that. And then I brought an old favorite. I'm pretty sure we might have done this on the show before, but it's been a long time. It's the 5-1 porter. I thought if I could think of a perfect beer to go in this mix with the Cigar-Malt and this Diamante, this might be it. So
that is an outstanding beer.
Yeah, excited about those. What about yours, Ian? What will you be sampling with us today?
Well, my bottles are bigger than yours.
Well, I'm not surprised. See, I'm trying to save my bigger bottles for when you and I are back in the studio and we can share. So
all I have left are bigger bottles. So today I brought the Tumbleroot Brewery. Now, if you remember, this was the one that was given to us, and this is a brewery in Arizona, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Sorry, not Arizona. Yeah. And so we tried. I tried one of their beers a couple weeks back, so I figured I'd bring out another one. And this is their double IPA, their honey double IPA from Tumbleroot. So we're gonna try that today. And then I dug around in there, and again, all I really have is big bottles left. And then I have the Deschutes Black Mirror. This is a barley wine rich ale with notes of toffee and dried fruit. You know I'm going to love that because it's a barley wine. So,
yes, sir.
Also, the rest of my day, I guess I'm not doing much. And then, because it's funny that you brought the Karbach,
yeah,
my show beer happens to be their Coastal Conservation Ale. So
Cristian,
we're on the same page with the Karbach.
Yeah. The show beer, Cristian, is what we often have. It's not one we're reviewing on the show or really giving any tasting notes on, but it's one that we'll use to just kind of get our palate going. And also because sometimes it takes a few moments to get to the drinking portion of the show, and quite frankly, we're thirsty. So
it's a bit of a palate cleanser, too. I usually try a lighter beer.
Every once in a while, you need a nice beer to get things going. I understand.
So Cristian, tell us about the Dalmore, about this particular distillery. What I love about talking about Scotch and talking about great distilleries is that they all seem to have an incredibly unique story. What is that story for the Dalmore?
Well, the Dalmore is a distillery that's been in its place in the Highlands of Scotland, just north of Inverness, since 1839. The story of the family that founded the distillery, really two families, the Mathesons and Mackenzies. The Mackenzie story is part of the spiritual story of the Dalmore, and it all goes back to the year 1263, when Colin of Kintail, who was leader of Clan Mackenzie at the time, actually saved King Alexander III from a charging stag. And in return, the king allowed the Mackenzie family to display this beautiful, which I don't know if you guys can see, stag on every bottle of the Dalmore. So that's how a lot of times people ask me, how did you guys get the stag? And that's the story of the stag.
And what is that made out of? Is that pewter on the front?
On the actual bottle?
Yes.
Yes, pewter.
Yeah, it's an absolute beautiful thing, and if you can pry one off without bending it up too much, it looks amazing right on the front of a cowboy hat.
You know what's funny? Many have tried. Few have succeeded. When you're trying to pry it off, it has a tendency to want to break.
Yeah.
So Ian, do not try until the whiskey is gone. That would be your number one rule.
Right. Otherwise, you got a funky looking bottle. No, it's a beautiful bottle. I absolutely love that on there, and it's it sticks up a bunch, so you can feel it. So it's not just a picture. It's not just a a decal. It's a real deal thing on there. It's cool.
It's a little sculpture on the bottle.
Clearly, from the story, Cristian, about how the Stag and the family crest came to be, clearly the Dalmore has been around for a few years. How long has the distillery been in operation?
Since 1839. 1839. So,
yeah.
So we are celebrating, 200 years. Yeah, we just celebrated 200 years. Yeah, I mean, I'm doing quick math in my head.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to doing a little tasting here, and I think, Ian, normally we go to the beers first, and then go to the spirits. But in this case, since this is cigar malt, and we've got the cigars going, I think we should open with the tasting of the Dalmore Cigar-Malt, if there's not an objection from you.
Let me think about that for a second. Hell yes.
Okay, good deal. Yeah. By the way,
I like your enthusiasm, guys.
Yeah. I am experiencing a lot of here. Ian, does it sound okay? Are you getting a lot of noise there?
I'm not getting a lot of noise. I'm getting a little bit of glitchiness, but I think I can do it. It just makes you look a little like, you remember Max Headroom?
Yes, he was cool. I liked Max Headroom.
I'm showing my age.
Let's pour some cigar malt, gentlemen. I went and got some cigar malt earlier this week and shared some with Ian. So just so you know, I have not consumed that much of my bottle. I poured some out for Ian. So.
All right. Have you guys? Well, you do this quite often. I'm sure that you've been to a whiskey tasting here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
as a matter of fact, Cristian, I want to say we met you at the Houston Whiskey Social. Is that right?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. So that's a sort of a mega whiskey tasting. But we've been to
mega whiskey tasting.
Yeah, but we've been to a few that were brand oriented as well. And where you get to kind of taste across the different expressions, and so if what you're saying is you want to invite us to one once things get a little bit back to normal,
when things get back to normal, you will be on the first row at my first official post-quarantine tasting. How's that, guys?
Awesome.
I'm taking you up on that.
You should. So for your audience that perhaps has maybe people have more experience going to wine tastings and whatnot, and a whiskey tasting is it's not that different. The first things you want to do is you kind of want to take a look at what you're about to drink. It gives you an idea, especially it's not so much about looking at the color, but looking at the what in a wine tasting you would call the
legs.
The legs, it's the same idea, and it actually I find it to be very informative as to alcohol content. When things are a little bit higher proof, like this cigar malt that comes in at 44%. Those tears or legs are going to tend to stick a lot more to the glass.
See if we can get people to see that out there. Yeah.
Right there. So, by the way, if you're watching at home, and perhaps for you guys too, if you want to look like you're a real, Scotch whiskey professional, as you're looking at your whiskey glass, my advice.
I'm sorry. You mean like Chris Hart? Is that what you when you say Scotch whiskey professional or whiskey expert?
Like our good friend Christopher Hart, he would be somebody that would come to mind.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is you give it a little swirl, but very important. This is the professional touch. You have to hold your chin like so.
Good at that.
Yeah, see, amateur and then professional. It makes a world of difference.
You should see me smoke a pipe.
Yeah.
The whole thing where I point and act like I'm going to say something and then I don't. Yeah, I got that down.
So Cristian, the cigar malt, how exactly. It can't just be an accident. It had to be a plan to try to distill something that would be, from its design, planned to be something that would pair well with cigars. Is that right? This wasn't just a happy accident, right?
This was not just a happy accident. So Richard Patterson, who is the master distiller and blender at the Dalmore, happens to be an avid cigar smoker.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, I was on a conference call with Richard just before you guys, and we actually talked quite a bit about cigar mold. But you know, I always joke that you can think of cigar malt as Richard's personal stash. He created something that he could pair with his. He's a big fan of Davidoffs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously you don't need to have a Davidoff. As a matter of fact, it's lovely without a cigar too. It's obviously it is a whiskey, as you mentioned, designed to be enjoyed with a cigar, but it certainly does not need a cigar to be enjoyed. It actually pairs quite well with desserts. And the way that the cigar malt sort of evolved into what we call today the cigar malt reserve, and this is going to answer your earlier question, Ian. Originally, the original cigar malt back from the 90s or so was a whiskey that was finessed in about 30% Matusalem Oloroso sherry. Matusalem Oloroso sherry is a 30-year-old sherry produced by González Villas in Jerez de la Frontera in Spain, and it's a cream sherry. It's very, very sweet, and the rest of it was in bourbon barrels. Then there was something, and I don't know if you guys ever had a chance to enjoy the Gran Reserva, which is something that came out after the original cigar malt, and that one was about 50% finished in Matusalem, the rest in bourbon. The one that you're holding in your hand right now, the cigar malt reserve, you're looking at a marriage of whiskeys that are approximately finished for, it's about 70% Matusalem Oloroso sherry, that 30-year-old sherry. It's about 20% in bourbon, and the rest is a Cabernet Sauvignon barrel, 10% Cabernet Sauvignon, all
Wow.
brought back together, and it creates a whiskey that it's just really, really lovely, especially on the nose. It's very jammy. It's got like 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 figs, raisins, kind of tropical notes, a little bit of marmalade, like almost like a you know
Marmalade's an interesting one. When you said jammy, I get
Yeah.
what you're saying, but marmalade
Yeah.
is that was
nails it
that.
even
What's that thing in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Because
an
you can
orange.
smell the sweetness, right? I mean, right from the nose, you can smell how sweet this is. I mean, I'm already anticipating that this is going to be a very sweet whiskey.
Well, when you consider that 70% of the whiskey that's in here was finessed in a 30-year-old Oloroso sherry cask, that Oloroso sherry is a mixture of 75% Pedro Jimenez grapes and 25% Palomino Fino. Like as I mentioned, very, very, very sweet, and that sweetness, stays in the barrel, and I think it translates onto the final whiskey. Yeah.
It's interesting. Sweetness and cigars don't necessarily feel they do like the kind of sweetness that the finish imparts to this really does work well with the cigar. When I think of sweetness in cigars, I think of that tone of flavored cigars so much as I am just like if you smoke a Swisher or something like that has that sort of cigar sweetness to it. That's not a flavor you get that cigars, but this sweetness is completely different, and it works.
What's interesting is that
the
sweetness is perceived on the nose much more than it is on the palate.
On the palate, yeah, for sure. Ian, you're pretty quiet. Is that just because you're enjoying, or did you have some deeper thoughts? Yeah, see, that worked. That worked.
I'm enjoying the smell. I'm picking up the oak. I'm picking up some vanilla, and I'm just enjoying that sherry. Like there's a scent that the sherry cask gives it, and we just did that.
I'm gonna plant something in your head. I know it's unfair to do this because like the power of suggestion.
Before you say that, I want to say tea leaf too. There's a little bit of.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So think of white milk chocolate. Like literally think of a Hershey's Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's definitely in there, but it's not that darker chocolate, deeper chocolate. It's more of that lighter, like you said, a white chocolate kind of vibe.
Like Hershey. To me, the cigar malt, I think of milk chocolate. And when we talk about the DNA of the Dalmore, whether you're enjoying a 15, a pour with cigar malt, 18, 12-year-old, there's a constant in terms of the flavor and aroma profiles, and that's going to be chocolate and orange. Always in different. So, for example, to me, the 18-year-old is it's more of that dark chocolate,
right?
And toasted tangerines. Whereas on the 18, I get that white chocolate, those Hershey Kisses, and a little bit of orange marmalade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that marmalade thing, you got me on that, or more like a dried orange kind of dried orange fruit kind of thing going on. My mouth is totally watering right now.
Yeah, have you not tasted it yet, Ian? Because it's very unusual for me to be way ahead of you on the tasting.
So here, what you want to do is just hold it in your mouth for as long as you can, and then really the tasting should come on the second sip.
Right. I'll tell you, to me, the joy of this is in the finish. That finish is just wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
So first off,
lovely long
chocolate bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The finish, the orange or marmalade that you're talking about, is really, really evident on the finish.
Yes, sir.
The oak, astringency kind of happens on the tongue after you swallow.
Yes.
And you pick it up a bit in the retrohale as well. It's really, really nice. There's a little bit of that char, that vanilla and char right there on the very end of it too. And then right about now, if you notice how long it's been since I took a sip, you get that whiskey hug coming back. It takes a long time for it to even come back.
Right.
It's a long finish, and I think that in the design of the whiskey, it was something that Richard surely considered as to be a whiskey that can stand up to a cigar.
So, Cristian, the original cigar malt came out, and then did it just sell completely out? And because I know it was gone for a while before the Cigar Malt Reserve came onto the market. What was the reason for it going away in the first place? Was it just gone?
No, I'll tell you. It's actually an interesting story. There was actually a bit of controversy behind it.
Wow.
Because there was this perception that we were somehow promoting smoking, which funny enough, these were probably much less politically correct times, but there was that perception. So then the Grand Reserva came out without the word cigar, but it was a very similar recipe, but to the old cigar malt drinker. I'm sorry. That was the thing that they could go to then, but similar recipe, but not exactly the same. And then there was so much desire for the cigar malt that at the end, we decided, you know what, we're bringing it back and as the cigar malt reserve, but this time with that added touch of the whiskeys that spent a bit of time in those Cabernet Sauvignon barrels. The other two versions of this did not touch Cabernet Sauvignon.
So I used to buy the one that was labeled cigar malt, and that one came in at 60 or 70 when I was buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed it, and then it was gone for a while, and I didn't know that the reserve kind of took its place. I had no idea. So I've just been sad for a while, and then when Cigar Malt came back out again, when did this hit the shelves, this particular iteration?
This particular one, I am going to take a stab and say that sometime in the mid 2000s, I'm gonna land it somewhere in the 2012ish, 20 right around.
Right, and this one comes in at a much higher price point than the last one. So I didn't know what was different about it at all. And this is the first time I've actually tasted this one. I also want to point out on the tasting notes on this, the very the very first burst of flavor on this hits you with a little butter as well, and almost a little bit of brown sugar kind of flavor as well. That I really enjoy. There's that sweetness right there at the very beginning, and that butteriness might be the oiliness in the whiskey that just kind of like it. As you drink it, it kind of sneaks it across your palate and just real. That's, I think, part of the long finish as well. That really it gets really involved in your palate before you finish your sip.
It is wonderfully complex. Cristian, is it that Cabernet finish whiskey that's added to this that was not in the original? Is that an expensive thing? Is that one of the reasons why the price point is higher on this whiskey, or was it just the fact that they knew they had a good thing, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. If they know they have a good thing and they know that it would handle a higher price point.
I think that there's a couple of answers to that question. First of all, Richard loves to experiment, and Richard really loves barrels, casks.
Right.
When the distillery brings in casks, Richard travels to the wineries, to whether it be France, in the case of the barrels that are used for cigar malt. These are Grand Cru, first growth Cabernet Sauvignon barrels from Bordeaux. I can actually tell you, I don't know if you guys are wine drinkers, but the winery is Haute Mabouzet. It's a left bank winery. They make superb wines. In any case, but he also likes to experiment, and I'm sure that as he had developed or began to develop the original cigar malt, he started to probably play around with some of those wine barrels. And when it came time to release this, he had been probably experimenting with, okay, what happens when we do ex bourbon, when we do ex Oloroso, and now Cabernet Sauvignon as well. And at the end of the day, I'm sure that after several experiments on the different ratios, he ended up at what we today call the Cigar Malt Reserve.
So I just added 3 drops of water to mine.
Mm-hmm.
And the water brings out the fruitier flavors. It brings out almost a graham cracker kind of thing going on in the aftertaste as well. That's really, really nice.
Interesting. Ian, I realize it's a tough question to ask you to compare this to something that you drank 10 years ago. But to the best of your recollection, how does this compare with the original cigar?
To the best of my recollection, I remember, the cigar malt original that I had, I liked a lot because at that point in time, I was really starting to experiment with whiskey and cigars. And of course, you see something on the shelf it's called cigar malt, and you go, well, no brainer, right?
Right.
So I remember that one not being quite as complex as this, and also not being quite as refined overall. I remember it having a little more bite to it in the on the alcohol side, on the heat. I remember, however, that it went really well with cigars, and especially cigars on the lighter side. Not due to the fact that it couldn't stand up to a heavier cigar, but that it really complemented the flavors on the lighter cigars. And at that point in time, when I was drinking that, Gurkha was still making cigars that didn't fall apart. And so I remember a lot of their line, like their Beast and their Beauty, both went well with it because I had a bunch of those at the time, and some Grey Cliffs as well. I probably went through 2 or 3 bottles of that before I couldn't find it anymore. So I think I was a little late on finding it. But that's what I would say. I'd say this is amazing, though. This is absolutely fantastic.
Cristian, you mentioned that your distiller particularly likes Davidoffs. Davidoff is a really well-crafted, but definitely on the lighter side cigar. So
medium at most.
And I will just mention that this Cohiba, that was my gift from Ian, it's definitely on the lighter side. I'd put it on the lighter side of medium. And it's working beautifully with the cigar malt. I also brought, and I may switch up just for the experiment, I also brought, and I've talked about this cigar before, but this is a much more full-bodied cigar, the Romeo and Julieta crafted by A.J. Fernandez, a Nicaraguan tobacco cigar. And I may have to light that one up and try it while we're still enjoying this, just to get how the cigar malt reserve works with a fuller bodied cigar.
I enjoy the cigar malt with medium cigars. I would say that my go-to would be a Montecristo number 2.
Very nice.
I have one in my humidor. I almost grabbed it, but I grabbed instead, as my backup cigar, I grabbed a Ramon Alones as my backup to see how that would go with a Cuban.
Ian, I get the impression you, both in your beer selection and your cigar selection, that you're beginning to work through some of your special occasion stuff during quarantine.
I am. I'm going to have to re-up a little bit.
That's good. Cristian,
I haven't been out. I've been cloistered at my house.
Cristian, I wanted to ask you the question. The cigar malt comes in at 44 proof. Is there a specific reason that wound up being the number? Most overproofed whiskeys will go higher than that, and most of the ones, in my experience, that are not more overproofed usually try to shoot for that 40. So I found it interesting that this is 44. Is there a specific reason that was the number that worked in terms of the proof?
That's a question that comes up often. Scotch whiskey, in order to be Scotch whiskey, must come in at a very minimum of 40%. So 40% is the sort of the bar, and then we can start ranging up from there up to obviously cask strength. What I've heard from Richard is that he experimented with different with higher proof, maybe lower proof, and the true and honest answer is that at 44% was that sweet spot where the whiskey did not overtake the cigar, but it also did not allow the cigar to overtake the whiskey. It's about keeping that balance.
Right. Well, he totally nailed it. He totally nailed it.
I find myself gravitating to overproof cigars or overproof whiskeys in general, just because I feel if I want to lower the proof, I can do that with my little dropper bottle here.
Well, Since you guys are talking about higher proof whiskey, I think I'm going to graduate to your favorite one, the Portwood Reserve.
Yes.
This one comes in at 46.5 ABV. So this is from what we call the principal collection at Dalmore, which is whiskeys from the 12, the 15, 18, Cigar-Malt, Portwood Reserve, King Alexander, and then topping out with the Dalmore 25. This is the one that is the highest proof. And I understand that you mentioned earlier that you tried it not long ago and you enjoyed it, right?
Well, yes, this is the one that I've actually had a bottle in my bar for quite some time, and broke it back out again as a part of the show that we did 2 weeks ago, where we were just talking about different cask finishes. And like I said, Ian was doing some cherry cask stuff, and I did 3 whiskeys that were port cask. And that was when I was reminded of how much I loved that particular expression.
The Portwood is really a great example of Richard Patterson's dedication to cask finish, and honestly, what Richard is doing is simply continuing what is a tradition at the Dalmore. You have to understand that the Dalmore, they have been finessing or finishing whiskey in multiple barrels, what we call multi-barrel maturation, since the inception of the distillery. What today is something very trendy is something that the Mackenzie family did from the beginning. They were really, really ahead of their time. So Richard continues that tradition. And the importance of the cask is it's incredible. He sources the barrels for Portwood Reserve just as he pays a lot of attention where the Oloroso sherries come from places like Gonzales Villas. This one's come from Grams. And we're actually, I don't know if you guys are big port drinkers, but the specific barrel is the Tawny Port 10-year-old from Grams. These are barrels that are incredibly hard to get a hold of. But because we have been doing it for so long, the distillery has built up these relationships to where they're able to literally pry barrels that when they come to the distillery can be upwards of 100 years old. Now, the beauty of dealing with a place like Grams is that, we have the papers on that barrel. We know everything that barrel has gone through. What if it was repaired, if a stave was changed, anything that happened, we get what you could call it the barrel facts. Like you got a Carfax. This
Right.
is the barrel facts.
That's great. That's great. Well, it is a really fine whiskey. It's got a wonderful complexity to it, but it is also not. It's not as you might think. In other words, someone who's a more of a novice in whiskey or Scotch, I think, can try it and appreciate it. It doesn't require our friend Chris Hart level of understanding of whiskey to enjoy it. It's just a really delicious and kind of a flavor forward finish. It's really wonderful. Ian, I see you're still working on that. Any further thoughts as you've diluted that a little bit?
I can't stop drinking it. Well, so I have to tell you, I'm really looking forward to trying my barley wine with this to see what those two flavors do with each other, because this has once I put I literally put 3 drops of water in here, and it's amazing how much that can change the taste. And I always enjoy the experience. So, those of you out there who, there are people out there that cringe about putting water in whiskey. Well, try it. It changes the flavor, and not in any kind of bad way. This is turning, the chocolatiness is smoother. The I don't know that I like it better, but I like it different. And the dark fruit comes out a lot more on the back end, on the finish on this when adding a little bit of that.
We're only going to I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you lose a little bit of the butteriness that you had right up front on it before, but you end up gaining different things in it, and the raisin / date flavor that was kind of lurking in the background comes up a little bit, and gives it kind of this dark sweetness on the finish that I think, and it has, again, I mentioned earlier, a little bit of brown sugar. It has a little bit of that kind of aftertaste to it that I'm really enjoying with the cigar tremendously. It's added a third dimension to my cigar, and the cigar, I think, adds a dimension to the whiskey. It's a really nice interchange between the two, and I think that's brilliant.
Ian, we're only going to have Cristian for a few more moments here because he's got another appointment. So why don't you go ahead and open up that barley wine? Might not be the order we were going to do it in, but I'm curious myself, and that's just a wonderful bottle. So I'm really curious. And what I may do is reach for this pecan porter, and let's see what bringing those into the mix do for our
those darker flavors like that, I think, are really going to light up, because it's interesting a lot of times how those things blend with whiskeys as well. And I really, since I knew we were doing a cigar malt, I did pick this bottle particularly to see how well it went with.
Very, very appropriate to barley wine is it's Scotch whiskey before it becomes Scotch whiskey.
Right.
Yeah. That might be one of the reasons I like it so much.
Oh, I don't think there's any might about it, Ian. I think that
the mash bill is awful similar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, for single malt Scotch, you're looking at a mash bill that is 100% fermented barley. So that's what you have there.
So this one right away is very. It's not totally black. There's a little bit of. It's not totally black. It's mostly just dark brown. It's got some carbonation to it. Oh. Immediately smell that barley wine, date, and raisin right off the back end of it. Some vanilla.
I'm just thinking that was made to go with this whiskey.
This barley wine's a little more bitter than what I usually like, but it really, really hit my palate on that first sip. Now, keep in mind, my palate has cigar and whiskey on it immediately, so it might be the sweetness from the whiskey as well, making that a little bitter, but bitter in a coffee or a very dark chocolate kind of way. Yeah, I think that was my previous palate messing with that. It's got a lot more coffee flavors than I'm used to getting in a barley wine. So this is a little more of an Americanized barley wine, I believe, because it also has a lot more hop on the finish than I was expecting, but which I usually don't like as much, but this is actually quite good.
Well, a lot of it could have to do with the combination of things. I mean, I haven't gone to the porter yet, but I'll just say I had another sip of the Cigar-Malt and then back to this, and it's just amazing the flavor enhancement of the cigar once you've got a really nice amount of that on your palate. It just seems so much more nuanced. There's so much more there that I'm picking up on. Definitely some wood and toast and some nuttiness that I don't know if I noticed when I was smoking the cigar before I started drinking the cigar. So it'll be interesting to see all three of those together, how they work.
I love that you said nuttiness, because when I went from the barley wine back to the whiskey, I pick up almost a little bit of, as weird as this may sound, peanut butter on the finish.
Talking about on the whiskey finish or the cigar?
Well, on the finish of the whiskey after the barley wine.
Gotcha.
So it's interesting how that's interacting. But then again, I'm going to try a full strength now and see what happens.
While you do that, I just want to show this to the camera. The wonderful and beautiful color of that 5.1 2/4. It is almost jet black, but the little ring of suds around the top is very almost a light brown, and it's just that's a beautiful color combination. I'll show you that there as best as I can.
So,
and
going back to the full strength here, while you're taking a sip, going back to the full strength cigar malt here, that barley wine brings out the orange big time. You taste a lot of that orange that I wasn't getting as much of at the beginning, but it's really prevalent now in a wonderful way.
Love it.
Wow.
Have you guys ever tried?
I'm kidding.
Have you ever tried that one?
Trying to see it a little closer there. Pull it over in front of your face, Christian. I only see half of the thing. Oh, wow. I have not.
I highly recommend that when you can and get a chance to pick up a bottle of the Dalmore 15. It's actually one of my favorite ones out of the entire Principal line. It's whiskey finished in 3 different sherry casks. 2 30-year-old casks. So you have two of them are 30-year-old sherries, Matusalem and Apostoles, and then a younger 15-year-old Amoroso sherry. So, and then all brought back together. It is a really, really lovely, just easy to drink whiskey with nice soft notes. You know,
really your entire line is really just all about these multiple finishes, isn't it?
Correct. There isn't a single bottle that just goes from former bourbon to the bottle. There's everything is has a long maturation in former bourbon barrels, but then the finishes get interesting.
Now, do all of the Dalmores start with the same distillate, and then the finishes and the length of the finishes, and that's the difference, or is there a different mash bill for different versions, different iterations?
No, it's all the same. So we make we have 8 stills. 4 wash stills, 4 spirit stills. They're all of different sizes too, which is very interesting. It's not very common in to have a distillery with different shape and sizes for their stills, and it makes a very, very unique new make. As a matter of fact, next time I see you guys in person, I'm gonna make sure to let you try some of the new make, because it's actually quite pleasant to drink. But
to
answer your question, one new make that then becomes all the whiskeys.
So most distilleries center around a specific type of still that they use, and that's where everything starts. Are you saying that you have different types of still, and then depending on what you want to create, you use the same mash bill, the same new make as you call it, and then put it through different stills for different effect?
Nope, we make only one new make. It's always the same, and then that new make goes into the different barrels. So the
finishing process, right?
The first barrels that all the new spirit will meet will be former bourbon. It'll spend at a minimum 3. By law, Scotch whiskey has to spend a minimum of 3 years in a barrel in order to be whiskey. So Everything goes into former bourbon barrels first. And then the magic starts where, we can start diverting some into, Cabernet Sauvignon barrels, Oloroso barrels, port barrels. We use Marsala barrels as well, which is quite unusual.
When you do a tour at the distillery, Christian, do you get an opportunity to taste what the whiskey is like after it's just had the 3-year rest in the bourbon barrel and before it goes on? It would just be so interesting to me to be able to compare that flavor with what happens once you start this, as you put it, the magic of
magic.
a distillery tour is always interesting, and this doesn't apply just to Dalmore, because it's so much about who happens to be there when you're there. If you happen to be visiting the distillery on a day that Richard Patterson happens to be around, he loves to show off all his whiskeys, so you may get a chance like that. More often than not, you will get to try the finished whiskeys.
I will just mention that, because I haven't talked about this too much, in going from the Pecan Porter, the 512, back to the Cigar Malt, I had thought that the beer would bring out some of the darker flavors, and instead it actually does the opposite. It brings out some of the lighter and sweeter and milk chocolate type flavors. Very interesting. I love it, but it was not what I was expecting when I put the two together.
So I went from the whiskey, if you remember, I poured myself a second glass, strictly for research purposes, of course. I poured myself a second glass and have been drinking it full strength. And what's interesting is when I go back to my barley wine, it makes the barley wine, first off, it's much more coffee flavored. That's what I was picking up first. But also there's like hints of apple in it now that I wasn't picking up at all before.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever said hints of apple when I tasted a barley wine before, ever.
No, that's a new one, I'm pretty sure. Cristian, I'm watching the clock here, and I know that you have got to disengage so you can go on to a couple of other things. So I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the show today, talking about the Dalmore with us. And please let Richard know we're giving a big thumbs up to the Cigar Malt, because I'm sure he's waiting breathlessly.
Big fan.
No, but seriously, I mean, we try a lot of different things on the show, and one of the things that we love to do is to talk about how these will interact with cigars. So cigars are a huge part of the show as well. And the answer in this case is it just as it was intended to. This
Brilliant
whiskey is made for sharing a cigar and a glass of this at the same time. So thank you for doing this.
I know you got to go. So just in the efforts of trying to make your life a little faster and easier, you can sweep everything on your table into a box, and I'll just send you an address, okay?
Yeah, you are too kind. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
that way it's 2 steps and you're done, right? Sweep it into a box.
I just wanted to say thank you for having me, guys. We met at Houston Whiskey Social. I heard from one of your people. I think it was maybe a few days after that. Mary contacted me. Mm-hmm. This has been on my books for a while, and I was afraid that it wasn't going to happen, and I was so glad when you guys reached out and it's like, no, we're doing it on Skype now. So
well, we do intend to be back in the studio hopefully in a couple of weeks. So let's get another date on the calendar. We didn't get to talk about Jura at all today.
We'll hopefully get to talk about Jura in person. And next time I'm in Houston, I'm gonna look you guys up.
All right,
awesome.
Fantastic. We will look forward to it, Cristian. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you very much for being on the show, and cheers to you, my friend.
Slanja, thank you.
Cheers.
Now, Ian, if you want to hang on for a few moments, there's a couple of things I definitely want to do. One is I think we should taste our other beer while we're in this vibe, and then we've started this new feature on the show that is what we call the drinking story, and the drinking story is a story out of the news or something similar to the news, but it's something that has been at least reported in the news that may not have anything to do. So, Ian, I was saying before the weird Skype bounce that we have this thing that we like to do on the show. I want to taste those other beers, and then we have this thing that we like to do on the show where we share a drinking story, something from the news or that was reported in the previous week that is not necessarily about spirits or beer or cigars, but that's a good story to share while you're drinking. And since we are most definitely drinking, I wanted to share this week's drinking story with you.
You share that story. I'm going to do what you did a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to change my second beer because I don't think a double IPA is going to go real well with what I got here. I'm going to grab something else.
You may be right. So, okay.
That's okay. I'm still attached. You just can't see me.
If you can still hear me, you're going to want to hear this story. Ian.
I'm hearing you right now. I'm by my beer fridge.
But this story is something to do with the coverage on the coronavirus, which we haven't spent too much time talking about here on the show. But this one I thought was important because there could be an air of truth to the phrase, or could there be, the story asks, an air of truth to the phrase, silent but deadly, when it comes to the spread of the coronavirus and the passing of flatulence. One of the questions that's been making the rounds is, can you catch a coronavirus if someone who is infected with it farts nearby?
On your pillow? I mean, what?
Yeah. And so I have the answer to that for you. What the experts are saying is, just like most government agencies are suggesting that you wear a mask when you're in public. That way, if you have any exposure to coronavirus, you're not passing it on to others. They said that basically your pants are your mask when it comes to this question. So the moral to the story is you should be fine unless you're around someone who is bare-bottomed and farting coronavirus at you. That's the basic point.
All right, hold on. I've got a couple. There's a couple things to say about this. First off, the question is not answered. For one, can you actually get it from someone passing gas? However, they said your pants are your mask. Does that mean I have to put pants on?
Well, yes. If you're wanting to make sure that you don't, because you can be a carrier for the virus but be asymptomatic, right? So you might not know, and so that's why they're suggesting. They say that when you wear the mask in public, that the mask on your face,
you're keeping it to yourself.
Right. It's more about protecting others than it is about protecting you, right? So in that case, pants would be the same thing. So yes, Ian, if you want to make sure you're not unwittingly spreading something to others, you may want to wear pants, particularly if you're going to be flatulent while you're in public. I realize this may put a damper on your normal social activities.
Totally cramping my style there. Because I always wear a shirt, but sometimes a man's just got to be free.
Yeah, that's right. You remember, and I've told you this before, that when the company when my business partner Pat and I started the company that is a part of Smoking and Toasting and a number of other things we do, we had three basic rules. We wanted to do something we enjoyed. We wanted to, it's getting a little windy up here. We wanted to do something we enjoyed. We wanted to do something that we could ultimately run from a boat, and we didn't want to have to wear pants. And so, these things figure into this. I'm just going to grab a bottle before it rolls off my balcony here.
Yeah, because if it rolls off of there, it's got a long way down to go.
Yeah, that could hurt. That wouldn't be good.
I still see your shirt, so I can't tell if you're wearing pants.
Yeah.
I'm just going to point that out.
That's by design, actually, and thank you for noticing. So what did you go and get? You went and got a different beer. What did you go and get?
Well, I figured a double IPA after a barley wine and after this super delicious, insanely malt wonderfulness of Scotch. So I went and grabbed something. This is the Fruitful Fort.
That should be interesting.
I don't know if you get a good beat on that while you're looking at the Fruitful Fort from Dogfish Head.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, I went big, and I decided, you know what? I want something that's very different. So this is ale brewed with boysenberry, raspberry, blackberry, and elderberry. Nice. You can probably guess just from that why it's called Fruitful Fort. It has. It does not have an ABV on the tag here, so I'll have to look that up in a minute. But it says ages well, and I've had this one in my refrigerator since it first came out. So I think I'm 8 months probably sitting in my fridge on this one.
Okay.
Maybe 6, maybe 8 months into it. So we're gonna try this beautiful thing out and see what happens.
Nice.
All right. My little beer mug here.
Beer mugs, yes. Very, very cool. So Dogfish Head, they're just one of those breweries that we feel like they can just about do no wrong,
I love Dogfish Head. I may not love every beer that they have, but I love what they're about. I love what they do, and I love a lot of their beers. And this one, I don't know if you can see the amount of sediment just floating around in this thing.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's an orangey brown, or a reddish brown maybe, and it smells like raspberry
and elderberry. What does an elderberry smell like, actually?
I don't know, but it's raspberry and something, so I'm guessing that's boysenberry or elderberry since I have no reference on it. I don't smell the blueberry in it at the moment. But blueberry doesn't have a real strong scent on its own anyway, I don't think, does it?
Right. And not as strong as some of the other berries, absolutely. Yes, your conclusion, sir?
Remember how he said that the cigar malt has a jammy kind of flavor?
Mm-hmm. Yes, preserves or
this has a preserves kind of flavor because you can almost taste the raspberry seeds,
like a marmalade.
And like this. No, this is not marmalade. Marmalade's kind of orange. Like this is raspberry and bitter fruits versus sweeter fruits. This is bitter fruits, but it has a sweetness to it that's pretty amazing.
The beer I'm going to try here, Ian, while you're enjoying that, and maybe you can go back to the cigar malt now and tell me what you think. This is Karbach, one of Karbach's F.U.N series, which is their. It's a lighthearted sounding series, but what it's really about is this is their barrel aging series. This is series number 18. It is the High Tide, aged in tequila barrels. High Tide pours a hazy gold into the glass with aromas of fresh fruit and the salty ocean air. Take one sip and get lost in the complex blend of flavors of passion fruit and spice. This was aged in tequila barrels, and it is from it's number 18, which I believe came out about a year ago. So it's 7.2%, and so I'm going to try this while you go back to a little bit of the.
I want to point out. You know those chocolate-covered orange slices that you get?
Yes.
When you go from the Fruitful Fort back to the cigar malt, it makes it like one of those chocolate-covered oranges, like more chocolate than orange, but so interesting. Go ahead, I'm listening.
I don't know if you got any of that or not.
Oh, no, that was beautiful. I was actually grinning because Brian, who he wasn't sure that he was going to be able to make it on. Man, look at the color on that.
That is a golden. It's much lighter color than my first beer.
But Brian piped in. He finally made it on. Hey, Wiki Brian. He wasn't sure he was going to make it. I talked to him earlier this week, but he mentioned that the Fruitful Fort is 15 to 18%. And I didn't even think about looking at a date on here, but the bottle date is, this has been here longer than I thought, 6/15/18. So it's been aging for over a year.
Wow. Ian, this is delicious. It reminds me quite a bit of the last Bishop's Barrel from St. Arnold that we tried.
Now, hold that up to the camera. Let me look at the color of that. That is so straw, but a little bit cloudy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a little bit red, even.
Yes, and it's just it's refreshing, but incredibly complex, showing that the guys there at Karbach can brew a very interesting and complex beer.
They can still have fun.
Yeah, yes, they can. And I bet that you may not be able to find this beer or this series, though, outside of Texas, maybe even outside of our town here in Houston, because I just can't see AB distributing a beer like this. And
so what's the ABV on that?
7.6, I believe, is what it said on the bottle. So it's about the same ABV as an IPA, but it's got. Ian, you know when you get one of those little cans of apple juice, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's a really predominant flavor in this. That sort of almost syrupy apple juice.
That concentrated apple juice?
Yes, exactly.
You know, let me tell you about that, because I love apple juice. It's so delicious, but it's instant heartburn for me.
Oh, interesting. Now, I don't know whether this beer would do that for you or not. But
probably not. It's something about apple juice by itself does that, but
front and center.
But I love the flavor. I absolutely love the flavor. And I also, have you ever had sparkling apple juice?
Yes.
So delicious.
Yeah, it's quite good. A very different experience. Believe it or not, I didn't know how this would work, but going back from that fun high tide from Karbach to the Cigar-Malt worked a lot better than I was expecting.
Well, I haven't.
I'm picking up a real intense sense of the malt in the whiskey coming through the Karbach. Very much so.
Well, that's what happens coming from this fruitful fort. I mean, you taste the malt, very chocolatey malt profile. And the orange, it's that chocolate covered orange. It's really interesting how well that goes. And everything we've done today goes well with this cigar, which, by the way, I refuse to give up because it's a great little cigar. Yeah, this was that H. Upmann Herman's batch.
Yes. I was going to light my second one, and as you can see, I never got to it. I'm still
How is that, Cohiba? How do you like that?
It's very good. I will say it wound up being a little flaky coming out of the tube, and the wrapper has shown a number of cracks, but none of that has gotten in the way of the smoking of it. It stayed, like a nice even burn, and it has smoked beautifully. It is definitely on the milder side of medium, but it has worked perfectly with everything we've done here. And I don't know if that's because it does or because the Dalmore Cigar-Malt just pulls everything together. If so, that's almost even more impressive in a way, So
he mentioned that that the distiller from Dalmore really enjoys like the Davidoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which
right.
generally don't get bigger than, say, a medium or even a medium minus.
Other than maybe one or two in their line will, jump in.
Right. And most of them are definitely in the mild or mild plus, but what I found with Cohibas and a lot of their line is they tend to be in that range. And even though they're lighter than what I would generally smoke, the Red Dot series and everything else, I find that their flavor complexity usually makes up for that. And it goes well with a lot of beers and a lot of whiskeys that I've tried.
Right. I'm betting I could smoke this with an IPA, something that was a little hoppier that usually gets in the way of some of the more medium to fulls that I like, and it would work a little better. But
those flavors would work around a little nice.
Exactly. Ian, I want to go over one more thing before we wrap up the show, and thanks again to Cristian for being on from the Dalmore. He was he was
awesome, wasn't
he? Knew his whiskey. He was just wonderful. Ian, I watched a movie. Do you have Amazon Prime?
I do.
Okay, so I want to challenge you to watch this movie. I watched it with my wife, and it was one of those things where she had to keep calming me down during the movie because it was a documentary film that turned out to be different than what I was expecting it to be, but I'm really glad that I watched it, even though it made me crazy while I was watching it. And it's called Beer Kings, and there's a number of documentaries, by the way.
It's called Beer Cans?
Beer Kings.
Oh, Beer
Kings.
Kings.
Beer Kings, yes. So there's a number of documentaries on and different shows and stuff on Amazon Prime, by the way, about beer, craft beer. There's a number about whiskey. So I've got a whole bunch saved in my, my wish list there on Amazon Prime, and decided to watch this Beer Kings one. It looked like it was about, and it is about, this contest between different brewers around the world to see who can come in first in the contest. So I thought, well, this will be interesting, seeing the different things they do to try to compete. Here's what I didn't know until I began watching. It is a contest, and it is different brewers around the world, but it's all brewers of Budweiser from around the world.
What?
The contest is actually held inside AB InBev.
I don't even understand what the Hold on. Slow down, Turbo. I don't even understand what the contest is then. They're all brewing the exact same beer, and they're trying to see which one brews the exact same beer?
Yes, and that's what made me crazy.
And it's all Budweiser.
It's all Budweiser. And to win the contest isn't about brewing the best beer. It's about brewing the Budweiser that is closest to, and you're talking about infinitesimally small differences in flavor, that is closest to the Budweiser thing. And you've got these brewmasters, and they're just sweating it. They're sweating where they are on the overall thing, because they do tastings once a month. And at the end of the year, they crown the Beer King for that. But it's not about, can you make a better, it's about, can you make the most consistent beer? Can you make the beer that is most like? And it made me crazy, because I thought, here you've got all these people, and Ian, there's no doubt in my mind that these brewmasters are incredibly talented, because the hoops
that's
are
like
coming to jump.
That's like saying who can make the best Pizza Hut pizza.
That's exactly right.
That doesn't even make sense to me.
It's like saying who can make the best Big Mac. Not the best Big Mac, but the Big Mac that is the most consistent.
The most Big Mac.
The most
so,
Big Mac. Exactly.
Brian posted up here, Kings of Beer, a never before seen look at the rigorous standards and intense competition that characterizes the brewing of the world's most iconic lager, Budweiser. My cat is digging in her claws and will not let me get her off my lap.
She has taken over the show. Well, so I just want to say, I really want you to watch this. It'll be a little painful, but the perspective that it gave you on what the mindset is of these brewers
of Budweiser.
Brewers of Budweiser, yeah. It was fascinating, but my wife had to keep calming me down. I'm like, but this isn't even about brewing the best beer. Like, had this been a contest between, I don't know, let's just say it had been Dogfish Head, and they had different brewers in their facility competing. It wouldn't have been about who could make the most Dogfish Head. It would have been about who could make the best beer. Like, who could come in? They'd have said, okay, this category is lagers. Who could brew the best lager?
Man,
this wasn't about.
You know who makes a better Budweiser than Budweiser? I want you to go back to, was it last week or the week before, where I put the 11 Below Little Snack?
Yes.
Man, that beer is outstanding. That's what I think. Like, that's what I think that, like, the classic, and that was a Pilsner or a lager. I can't remember which one, but it's the classic.
I think it was a lager.
And so good. Yeah, it's a lager, and it's so good at what it is, and it's so delicious and so full of flavor. Yet, if you took a Budweiser drinker and had them try that, I think that they would go, wow, it's like this, but with flavor.
Right. But, Ian, if that beer had been entered into this Budweiser internal contest, it would have ranked dead last.
Well, you said it. It's an internal contest.
Right, right.
Like, who cares if you can brew Budweiser as good as Budweiser?
Well, and what it tells us at the heart of the story is that at AB InBev, the holy grail is not the best beer. The holy grail is consistency. They want anyone who opens a Budweiser anywhere in the world, no matter what Budweiser brewery it was brewed in, they want it to taste exactly the same. And the brewmasters even talk about, going out to bars and stuff, and they would order a Budweiser and it would arrive, and they'd be making mental tasting notes of, oh, this one's.
I want to point out that their mentality is about 2 decades to 3 decades too late, because the truth of the matter is there was a time from the 60s to the 80s where everything became homogenized. Yes, you can get the same thing everywhere you go. You can go to the grocery store and you can get the same thing everywhere you go. You can go get TGI Fridays out of the frozen section and have TGI Fridays exactly like it is at your house, blah, 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 whatever. You insert whatever it is here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything was homogenized. You can get the same thing. But then craft beer started taking off because people wanted to taste other things because they're tired of the same old thing.
Right.
Well, and I think that whole contest is a beautiful and sad thing, because it very much says, hey, you guys, and they're sweating there. Can you imagine what their work situation is if they're sweating about that? Can you imagine what their work situation is? If someone at that brewery accidentally makes a good beer, it's going to get tossed.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And
that's amazing. If they accidentally make a good beer, it's out the door. You don't get to keep it.
It's what kept making me crazy when I was watching it. Honestly, it was, and you'll be crazy too, but I want you to.
Are you going to make me watch this?
So you can share in the crazy with me.
I have to. Okay, gotcha.
And I'll just say, by the way, since we're ragging on AB InBev's Karbach, you have made a fantastic beer. Cheers to you for the F.U.N Series number 18, the High Tide. This is a wonderful and amazing beer. And I will now be back out looking for more of this. I don't know. I bought this a while ago, so I don't know if there's any more of this out there. But I want more. It's wonderful.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ian, this has been a fun show. Now, you had an idea, and I think we're going to do this next week. You had an idea for a show where we would do a little taste testing and comparison for malt liquor. Are you up for that for next week?
Let's do it.
Okay.
You got to know bad to know good, so let's do malt liquor taste test.
All right. So you will be responsible for procuring the malt liquor, and and this should be fun. And so we'll do that next week. That'll be a lot of fun. And then if all goes according to plan, 2 weeks from today, you and I will make our re-debut in the Smoking and Toasting studio. So I'm excited about that. So
I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks again to Cristian Olave from the Dalmore. And I got to tell you, I hope you've got some of the cigar malt left, because I don't know how good I'm going to be about sharing what I have left.
I got it right here, buddy.
I hope you have some left in the decanter.
Oh, yeah. I got a little bit left.
All right. Well, very good. Well, Ian, my friend, it's always fun doing this with you. I'm looking forward to a couple of weeks from now when we can, share our beers and stuff with each other. And that'll be fun as well. So
virtual clink, sir.
Week, my friend. Thanks to everybody.
Clink.
Cameras over here. Clink. Thanks to everybody for watching
cheers.
the show, and cheers. Thanks, Adam, on the Wheels of Steel. All right.